the spiritual path of meditation. And this Sunday I want to talk about the spiritual path of release or letting go. And technically, release or letting go isn't really a spiritual path, but it is a quality and a component that is so integral to all of these other paths that it almost warrants being thought of as a pathway in itself. When I mention the words letting go and release in life, how many of you think you're really good at that? Interesting. So that's a learning and an undertaking. And even when I just say that, without really actually going into it, we recognize that there is something about those words that's a bit of a challenge for all of us. The passage that we heard this morning has Jesus saying, unless you're willing to let go of your life for my sake. And remember, over the last few weeks, we've also talked about Jesus describes the realm of heaven, the realm of God, as being like an emerald or a pearl that a merchant has. And when he finds a perfect pearl, he goes and sells everything that he has to find that pearl. Or when a person finds a treasure buried in a property, he goes and sells all of his other properties to buy that single property. What Jesus often says is that discover the greatest treasure, the greatest gift of all in life, which is the realm of God, the realm of heaven. We need to learn to practice the art of release, the art of disengaging, the art of letting go, to get us closer to that realm, to get us closer to God. But here is the great paradox within the human life, within the whole spiritual tradition and within all faith traditions, and it's a great paradox in Christianity too. We often think that in order to find God, we need to do something, we need to go somewhere, we need to become someone other than who we are if we're going to get close to God, if we're going to find God. But the actual understanding that lies at the deepest heart of all the spiritual traditions. And it's the paradox of the spiritual life, is that you don't need to become anything. And you don't need to go anywhere, because the realm of heaven, the presence of divinity, is right here. It's right here, all around us, and within each and every single one of us. As the child said, God is everywhere, and God is in our hearts. God is inside of us. We don't have to go elsewhere. We actually don't even have to become anything that we're not, because we already are manifestations of the light. We are manifestations of the great, profound mystery and being that we call God. And that is the paradox of the spiritual life that I think people constantly have trouble with. God is here within us. God is part of us. The spiritual life is simply a matter of discovering who we already are. That discovery, though, involves not acquiring something else, becoming something else. That discovery involves releasing, letting go of that which is not true about ourselves. It's actually a process of release. It's a process of letting go in order to discover who and what we really are. And what Jesus suggests we need to let go of is this self, this sense of self. So what is this self that we talk about? And in all the sort of contemporary spiritual traditions, we talk about ego. We sort of equate ego and self together. It's letting go of all that stuff. So the self that we commonly identify with and we associate with is in actual fact, it's a complex, personal, sociological, psychological, bodily inspired construct. Okay? From the moment we're born, our society teaches us that you are a self. You are an individual, right? I'm proud to be an individual, particularly in Western society, right? We are all these unique individual kinds of beings. And that is fostered by the sense of being an embodied person, right? Obviously, when I feel this is me, I'm embodied. If I'm David, if I am this body, I'm not that body that is Carolyn. So obviously, I am a self. And a self is defined as something separate from everyone else. I am a separate construct or entity within a life that is governed and characterized by separation and discreteness. And this sense of self, I want to suggest to you, as we've talked about often when we talk about science and faith here at BUC, we talk about how our senses deceive us all the time, don't we? We talk about science, how science indicates that our senses, this was one of the great discoveries of the whole scientific revolution, how our senses constantly deceive us. We think that we live on a planet Earth that is the center of the universe, and that all the universe revolves around us. We discover that's not true at all. The planet is actually rotating on its own axis, and it's moving around the sun at whatever speed it is, 300,000 kilometers a second. It's crazy. But our senses deceive us all the time. That's what Descartes said as well, right? That we cannot trust our senses. And so from a very early young age, from the moment of our birth, we have been taught to believe and to understand ourselves as these discrete, separate entities and selves in the world. And the spiritual traditions say to us, that is not ultimately a true picture. Anthony DeMello, who is a well-known spiritual director and storyteller from some years ago, used to tell the story about a lion that was captured, and this lion was placed into kind of a zoo-like place and construct where there are all sorts of other captured lions, okay? And when this lion was captured and placed into this huge zoo that was filled with other lions, and he observed the other lions, he was quite amazed at his sense that there were sociological lions who were sort of creating society and culture within this huge lion enclave. There were business lions who were learning how to make money off of the other lions in this great enclave. There were even religious lions who were talking about how someday they would all go to a great lion land in the sky and there would no longer be any cages for any lions. And this particular lion, though, was a bit of an outsider, and the other lions weren't quite sure what to make of him. He kind of wandered around. He didn't engage too much in the other lion activities. And sometimes a new young lion would be captured and deposited into this lion enclave, and this lion would come up to this other elderly lion, and they'd talk, and he'd say, "What advice can you give me?" And this lion would say to him, "Listen, all the lions in this lion enclave are focusing on all sorts of things that don't really matter." Okay? And the new young lion says, "So what do you recommend? What should I be focusing on?" And the lion says, "You should be focusing your attention on the fence, studying the fence." If we want to know freedom, if we want to know the realm of heaven, we need to learn to study and understand this creation that Jesus tells us we need to let go of, and that is called the self. I've often spoken to you that the self is like a fist. Remember, I've talked about this over the last few weeks. The fist it's a process. The self is a process by which we refer everything in our lives as though to an individual me. Okay? Jesus had to develop a deep and profound understanding of this process and this self within his own life. When he went off into the wilderness to pray, and you remember when he goes into the wilderness and the devil comes and tempts him, and the devil says to Jesus, "Oh, take you up to this high mountain, overlook all the nations of the earth, bow down to me and I'll give it all to you." He says, No. And the devil says, "Come and cast yourself off and this tower, and I'll make sure that the angels look after you." And Jesus, no. Jesus had to contend with aspects of his self, his ego, that had to do with ambition, that had to do with pride, that had to do with the lust for power and money. These are all aspects that are part of all of our humanity. And they all emerge out of this sense of being an individuated self. Just think about for a second. So what are some of the self characteristics that you have trouble with, that I have trouble with? Well, let's think about self-esteem, for instance. And if we have low self-esteem, what does low self-esteem emerge from? It emerges from having this sense of being a small, individuated entity compared to other people who are all so much better and bigger and more capable and qualified than yourself. And when you compare yourself with others, you have this sense of being small and contained and not worthwhile. Or think about, I'm a self-made person and I'm proud of it. I've achieved success in life. I'm walking my own way in life. Where does that come from? Again, it comes from feeling that you are an individuated kind of person in charge of your own life and control of your own destiny, and that you have succeeded in life and that you are better than everyone else. Think about when there's anger. You're angry at somebody else. It's because the person you're angry with, you have a sense of that person being separate from you. That person has done something to me, and I'm separate from them, and so I'm mad at you for what you did to me. Or I'm jealous because of what you did to me. Or think even about when there's something really fun going on in your life. Danielle and I were joking about this the other day. I see all these Corvettes and hot sports cars driving around on the road these days. It used to be when I was young, all the people driving hot Vets and sports cars were kind of young macho dudes. Now they're all elderly retired folk. Have you noticed that? I made Danielle a bet the other day. We were driving down the road and there was a hot vet in front of us and I was behind her. I said, "Danielle, I bet that's an old dude driving that vet." And I just sort of pulled out and passed up, and sure enough, we're attached to all sorts of stuff that makes us feel good about ourselves being these individuals, give us a sense of fulfillment. I've arrived or somewhat, right? I would say to you that the source of most of the world's misery, most of the world's struggle and suffering, emerges from us believing that we are enclosed individual entities in these little bodies of ours that are going to die someday. Whereas in actual fact, the spiritual truth suggests quite the opposite. That we are actually manifestations of infinite light and energy. That this body is just a temporary, impermanent, and ultimately not the most real part of who we are. And that we ultimately, all of us, emerge from, participate in, and manifest out of a single life, a single reality, which is the light and the power and the creativity, which is the heart of God's own being itself. Carolyn, who is our wonderful in-house poetess, and you know, I think you should give Carolyn a big hand. She often, I don't know what, sometimes I don't, she often creates these beautiful poems on the back of our bulletins, right? And I take her for granted all the time, but she's absolutely a wonderful spiritual luminary amongst us. And give her a big hand. She is. She's just wonderful. Some years ago, she wrote this beautiful, beautiful poem that I have always loved and held close to my heart. And it's simply called Letting Go. And it holds within it the image of a red balloon and a child. I want to read it for you. I bought my child a red balloon in memory of a shining day. It's floating gaily overhead as fairground clamor fades away. She clutches firmly at the string as slowly we walk hand in hand, reluctant pilgrims moving on away from magic fairyland. Silent and sad, a little space, we trudge an ordinary street. A playground beckons and she goes to taste again old pleasure sweet. But she's hampered by that red balloon, the joyous past, the present care. She tugs the string and stares aloft. But then she lets it go and runs to dare. How many strings trail in my hands, trying to bind my past to me? Black fear or rage, or even crimson joy, or graying mists of apathy. Let go, the past is done, the future is this present day. Now I am free for joy and peace, as trusting God becomes my way. I absolutely love that image of a child hanging on to a red balloon and then thinking, oh, I got it. I finally arrived. This is beautiful. And so I'm going to run throughout all my life. But it prevents her from experiencing more within herself and about life until she lets it go. She can't embrace life in its greater fullness. You notice how that hanging on to the balloon and the fist is one and the same activity? The self is an activity of being knotted into ourselves, of being unable to let go of all those sensations, all those emotional and mental states that most fully derive out of our sense of being separate and discrete in the world. And when we recognize and start to intuit that we are part of and manifestations of a great oneness, a great power and light and creativity, then we learn to, whatever it is, to let it go and just float through life. And that leads us to the final point I want to make with you this morning. It's another great paradox. The great paradox of the spiritual life is that I have to grow spiritually. I'm the one who has to do the work to grow spiritually. How many of you feel that way? I have to work and do my work and grow spiritually. And we forget. That's another delusion that is part of the same self-construct that creates the anger, the fear, the jealousy, the low self-worth, all of that, is that I have to do the work. If I am a manifestation of the divine, really, whose job is it really to make this the beautiful person who recognizes their true being and identity? Whose work is it? It's God's work. It is God alive within us who is seeking to become aware of God's own presence in our lives. And what we need to do, it's the paradox, we simply need to learn to let go of all the ways in which we think I am in control of my life, I am in charge of everything, and I am also the one who is generating all these negative emotions and thoughts about myself. And we need to, that's all a process of generating those thoughts and those emotional states and learning to trust that I am a child of God. I am a manifestation of light. And that trust itself will carry us forward through life as the little girl with the red balloon does. That trust in the divine will carry us forward into life and will lead us to the spiritual wisdom and insight that we are forever part of God. God is forever part of us, and God carries us every step of the way. Some of you know that wonderful path, that wonderful poem, Footsteps, right? In all the difficult times of my life, I looked back and I know it was God who was carrying me. Well, God's carrying us all the time anyways. It's not a path per se. That's a realization and intuition that we come to as we engage in any spiritual path. As we hunger for God in our lives, as we draw closer to the light starts to shine through us more brightly, and it becomes a life of its own. And it leads us into the ultimate insight, which is what Jesus was all about. He had this incredible sense of intimacy with God, right? That's why he called God Abba. He had this beautiful sense of intimacy with God, that God was part of him, God was with him. He was a child of God, an expression of God. As we learn to release and trust that insight and to trust the divine, we'll be drawn into that ever deeper intimacy and sense of oneness with the divine as well. And that is the realm of heaven. That is the divine domain that Jesus says is the gift of infinite value. Namaste, BUC. The Spirit in me honors the Spirit in you. Amen.
When darkness falls and I'm all alone, it's then I know I need to reach out and hold your hand, 'cause you won't let go, you never let me go. Show me your heart, oh God of love. You are beautiful, beautiful. How do I find your light in me? Be still and know, be still and know. My heart has something to say, created for a purpose to walk in your way. My heart has something to say, created for a purpose to walk your heart, oh God of love. You're beautiful, beautiful. How do I find your light in me? Be still and know, be still and know. My heart has something to say, created for a purpose to walk in your way. My heart has something to say, created for a purpose to walk in your way. When we seek you with all of our hearts, we will find you. We will find you. When we knock, you'll open the door. We will find you. We will find you, God. When we seek you with all of our hearts, we will find you. We will find you. When we knock, you'll open the door. We will find you. We will find you, God. When darkness falls and I'm all alone, it's then I know, I need to reach out and hold your hand, 'cause you won't let go, you never let me go.
That was beautiful. Thank you, Barry, and the baritones. So in the community prayer today, I'm going to investigate a little different aspect of letting go than what David did today in his wonderful sermon. Most of us, when we think of letting go, it's more of an emotional letting go or a materialistic letting go. Throughout our lives, we all have times when we need to make decisions about what we need to let go of and what we need to nurture more tenderly and carefully. This is often not an easy decision to make, especially when we have to release something that has been very dear to us. Well, this is Poetry Day at BUC. The poet Dana Folds describes this well in her book, Go In, and the poem is called Let It Go. Let go of the ways you thought life would unfold, the holding of plans or dreams or expectations. Let it all go. Save your strength to swim with the tide. The choice to fight what is there before you now will only result in struggle, fear, and desperate attempts to flee from the very energy that you long for. Let it go. Let it all go and flow with the grace that washes through your days, whether you receive it gently or with all your quills raised to defend against the invaders. Take this on faith. The mind may never find the explanations that it seeks, but you will move forward nonetheless. Let go, and the wave's crest will carry you to unknown shores, beyond your wildest dreams and expectations. Let it all go and find the place of rest and peace and certain transformation. Let us pray. God of wisdom, be with us, Lord, as we navigate the complexities of our lives. Help us to make the right decisions about what direction our relationships, our job and home choices, and our daily dilemmas should take. Guide us as we create lives that reflect love, compassion, and common sense. Please be with the people in Texas and the other American states who have been forced to let go of their homes, possessions, and loved ones because of Hurricane Harvey. Be with those who have been displaced by fires in Western Canada and in California. And be with the many thousands of people in Bangladesh, India, and Nepal who have lost their loved ones and their homes in flooding and landslides. Letting go was often painful and difficult. Grant them all the courage and strength to rebuild their lives and their communities. And please be with the Moyes family as they are tearfully letting go of their father and grandfather, David Moyes. We pray with the love of Jesus in our hearts. Amen. One more song, right? Okay, great.
Please rise as you're able to join us in River. Rushing down through the ocean.
Thank you to everyone who made this service possible today. It's always a big team effort. May you leave here today with the confidence to know what needs to be released and what needs to be nurtured. Go now in peace.
Go now in peace. Go now in peace. May the love of God
surround you every